Hello everyone, welcome. Today I'm going to ask those of you under 50 or in your 30s or 20s to stay with me for at least 5 or 10 minutes. I say this because I know the old-timers will probably stay, but I'm going to talk about something that the moment you hear the word, you'll probably say, oh, that's nothing to do with me. But it might have something to do with you. Do you know of anybody within your family, your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, or friends of friends that you know, whose memory is failing? Most probably because of advanced years, yeah? I'm going to tell you about this book. This is not a cure or anything like that, okay? It's a novel, it's fiction, but it's most interesting. I'm only going to summarize and tell you about the first part of the book. The second is more complicated, and if you're interested in the subject, I hope I can make it interesting. Then you can, go and read it. I have no commission for this, okay? But this is the book. You might have read it already, many of you, or you might have heard about it. I will put all the details down below in the description box, okay? But it's Time Shelter. Is the International Booker Prize winner for 2023. International because the author is Bulgarian and it was written in Bulgarian and translated into English. The author is Georgy Gospodinov and the translator is Angela Rodel. I am a translator myself. I think she's done a great job, really. It reads very, very easily, and at the same time you get the feel for the original without interrupting the flow and so on. But let me just read you the blurb. In Time Shelter, an enigmatic flaneur, for those of you young people, you may not know what flaneur is. I didn't either. I had to look it up to tell you the truth. But it's a French word, and it means that kind of person, perhaps a writer, perhaps an artist, who just strolls about observing life, doesn't have to go anywhere at any one particular time, just enjoys life, looks around, observes, okay? So an enigmatic flaneur named Gaustin opens a clinic for the past that offers a promising treatment for Alzheimer's sufferers. Each floor reproduces a decade in minute detail, and we're going to see what the minute details mean, transporting patients back in time. But as the rooms become more convincing, an increasing number of healthy people seek out the clinic as a time shelter, hoping to escape from the horrors of our present, a development that results in an unexpected conundrum when the past begins to invade the present. That second part I will leave to you to read if you're interested. I'm going to deal, as I said, only with the first part. So they're talking, these two friends are talking in this cafe, and one of them tells him what he's doing. He's opening up this clinic. And he says, do you think that old people, when they lose their memory, are bored? And the other one says, yes, I suppose so. They're not doing anything. They're just sitting there and they don't seem to be thinking about anything. Yes, I guess they're bored. And he says, no. Boredom, it's a little bit presumptuous of us to measure our boredom against theirs. They are not bored. And so starts the conversation about what he's doing. And he's going to say to him, remember things. We are not old, they're in their 40s. Okay, so what, you don't have to go back as old people do to specific moments. But I mean, what do you remember? You have been traveling everywhere. Okay, you remember cities. Okay. So let me read you just a paragraph from the book. It says, this is about cities only. He's walking him into more deeper details about losing memory and so on. Okay, so you are a young guy. So what do you remember? You've been traveling. About cities. Okay, cities. Youth. For your youth. Paris, Amsterdam perhaps? You know, with all their informality, whiffed of joints to go to, beer drinking, rolling around in the grass, Sunday flea markets, frivolity of sex. For maturity, Vienna and Brussels perhaps, you know, a slowing down of tempo, comfort, streetcars, proper health insurance, schools for the kids, a bit of a career is beginning, yeah, you're getting promoted. Now, for those who do not wish to grow old, Rome, Barcelona, Madrid, good food, warm afternoons, strolling about, that could make up for the traffic, the noise, slight chaos. Also, he says, for this late youth, that would include, he says, New York. I count it as a European city that ended up across the ocean due to a certain chain of events. Zurich, he says, is a city for growing old. The world has slowed down. The river of life has settled into a lake, lazy and calm on the surface. The luxury of boredom and the sun on the hills, the sun there for your old bones. And he asks him, have you an ear for the past? So he's going to say, look, when we start losing our memory, we have a home. The present is like a foreign country, a people sort of speaking a foreign language. You are not at home, you don't know what is happening or which way to go. But you do have a home, perhaps a decade. You remember, for example, the 40s? The 40s might be your home. He gives the example of a woman. He says, first of all, the 40s are on the first floor of the clinic. He has already one clinic. He hopes to, for this to work out and to open clinics all over the world. This is his dream. But in this particular one, he says, the 40s, the decade of the 40s is on the first floor. Not just, as you may imagine, because for those people, it would be more difficult to live on the second floor or the third floor. No, because as he explains, there is a woman there who, the ground floor is near the basement. There is a basement. And there is a woman who goes to the basement. No one forces her to. She goes voluntarily to the basement because there are all those bombs, you see, in the air. You have to protect yourself. You go down to the basement, under the stairs, there. Yeah, and she's fearful because of all these bombs. But then she comes out and she's relieved and happy again, big smile. She's 9 years old. Yeah. You could say, but that's cruel. You know, letting them remember these awful stories. And no, not necessarily, you see, because fear is something that actually triggers memory, cracks the memory open, and you bring back life and other remembrances. She's happy when she comes out, you see, of the basement. Yeah. Sometimes you're a child. This is about not just decades, but perhaps one particular instance in your life that you remember. The author says, I'm going to read, he says, perhaps you are a child. Your father has just come home. This is in the 40s. He has just got paid today because he managed to find a job a few weeks back. And this day has bought jam and butter from the shop. Because after days and weeks and months of rationing and eating pretty much, potatoes and one sausage or whatever, his father gives him a big slice of white bread and spreads really thickly, the butter and the jam on it. And they are both laughing. And his father, who is otherwise a stern man and who doesn't believe in spoiling children, he picks him up and puts him on his shoulders. And they walk around the room like that. And then they stop in the middle of the room. And the little boy looks point blank at the glowing filament of the bulb, which is now at eye level. Why are you remembering all those details? Eye level, the bulb. Do we all have particular memories like that, specific points in our life? They don't all have to be happy ones necessarily. An example, men with their fathers, their relationship. I say men just as an example. Women, we have our issues with our fathers and mothers too, but just as an example. Because men sometimes do not communicate their feelings as easily as we women do, especially when you go back to earlier decades. Your grandfather or your father may not have communicated as well as your mother, kind of thing. So there is always a point there. You know where that point is. Something he said or didn't say, you hoped he would have said, or something he did or didn't do. And there is a soft spot there for you, and you know exactly where it is. When you want to deal now and communicate with your father. So, he has this huge clinic with 1 decade on each floor. So the 40s is going to be unfurnished like the 40s. And the 50s on the first floor. 50s. Remember the 50s, the big, huge radio thing? It had two knobs. One was for volume and the other one was for you to figure out. It was all AM, wasn't it? There was more crackling noise than anything. I do remember that it had the names of cities there: London, Paris, Brussels, something like that. What did that mean? That when you when you move the knob to Paris, that you would hear the radio in Paris or something like that. I never knew quite. It didn't seem to work that way. But anyway, the 40s. The furniture of the 50s. The sofas, the 60s, the televisions from the 50s also onto the 60s. Do you remember the television set with the 4 legs? It was like a trunk. And the rainy things. In England, do you remember, we had BBC One, and then BBC Two came up. Was it 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock? You know, with the little girl there and the stripes, the color stripes there, and then it went on until 12 o'clock, and then the national anthem. You remember that? And we rented the television set. It was too expensive to buy a television set. And we all knew something about a tube, that if it broke, it couldn't be repaired. And so you would have to buy a new one. You couldn't afford that. So we rented television sets. Tape recorders in the 60s. Do you remember the heaters? You had to put a coin in. Gosh, that must have been so expensive. The 70s and the furniture. The 70s, the furniture of the 70s. When did we do away with the open fires and put radiators all over the place? Was that in the 60s or the 70s? What a massacre! But anyway, we had in the 70s the television set changed, and now it was an item. You remember? And we could put it on top of a cabinet, or sort of a piece of furniture, a cabinet, yeah. And then the music centers. I thought, when I first heard music center, I thought they were talking about a shop or a store. No, this was a huge thing. It was the tape recorder, the radio, and the record player all in one, and you could record things. You remember that? You remember the wallpapers? The cities, the sofas, the couches, the lamps. He says, he doesn't want it to be a set. He wants the colors and the smells and stories. He says, explaining this, but this is what I hope to do, and he's going to explain it further, but he says, but the way things are going, believe me, one day, very soon, the majority of people, not with failing memories, people, young people, will start returning to the past of their own accord. They'll start losing their memories on purpose, willingly. But there is a difference, though, because for us, who still have our memory, the past, even though it may be a shelter, and we may have to go back to that shelter just to keep our sanity, he says, for us, the past is the past, and even if we were to step into it, we know that the exit to the present is open. We can come back to the present with ease. But he says, for those who have lost their memories, this door has slammed shut once and for all. And for them, the present is, as I said, a foreign land, a foreign country, while the past is their homeland. They know their way about there. So what I'm trying to do, he says, is to create a space that is in sync with their internal time. It will give them the right to happiness, or to a memory of happiness, to be more precise. We assume that the memory of happiness is a happy memory, but who knows? You see, in this home, they start telling stories, remembering things, even though some of them haven't said the word for months. So this is what he wants to do, to recreate, and that involves the furniture, the newspaper, the television, the couches, the cities, the lamps. One woman says, "Oh yes, I remember that lamp. It was in the sitting room. Yes, and my brother broke it with a ball one day, and my mother was so upset. But the sofa was not quite there. It was a little bit closer to the wall." But the past is more than a set. We will need everyday life to make it real. Otherwise, it's a kind of a Disney thing. No. He really wants to make it real. Everyday life, tons of everyday life. We are going to need stories, lots of stories, smells, sounds, silences, people's faces. If you're in the 60s and you are a woman, you remember the headers. In short, all the things that crack the memory open, mixing memory and desire. The saying that you can never step into the same story twice is not true. You can. That is what I am trying to do. And remember, the past is not only what happened to you, sometimes it is what you hoped for. It stays there in your memory, what you desired, what you imagined. I'm reading from the author. He says, past eras are volatile. They evaporate with ease, like an open bottle of perfume. But if you have the nose for it, you can always catch a whiff of that fragrance. I am not trying to create an illusion. Fragrance, the smells. He says how unfair that smells have no names. It's not like colors, blue, red, yellow, green. But somehow we are not meant to name scents directly. It's always through comparisons. It's descriptive. So we say it smells like violets, or like a toast, or like seaweed, or like rain, or like a dead cat. But these are not the names of scents. This widow, he says, he has his memory is failing. His memory is leaving him. He has no friends, no living relatives, no one to call. He asks, if we are not in someone's memory, do we even exist at all? And that sentence, tell me who I am. If there is someone who still loves you, even though you may not recognize him, but someone who loves you, this means that you have existed after all, even if he doesn't remember anything himself. And for those of us, the thought might have crossed our minds, if he or she doesn't remember anything at all. It's a painful question. Do I need to visit every day anyway? Because he doesn't know me, he doesn't remember me at all. Do I need to visit? I mean, what is the purpose of that? You see, he might be living in a different world. He doesn't remember you, but he's living somewhere. The author says, for us, if he remembers nothing at all, then you probably see yourself free of all guilt for, not visiting, for example. If he doesn't remember, then everything is permissible in your own behavior towards him. But, says the author, if no one remembers that expression, he doesn't remember anyway, if no one remembers, that is the equivalent of if there is no God. And if there is no God, as Dostoevsky said, then everything is permitted. So God will turn out to be nothing but a huge memory, a memory of sins, a cloud with infinite megabytes of memory, a forgetful God. A God with Alzheimer's would free us from all obligations. No memory, no crime, no sin. Let me read you what he says here on page 69. One elderly man whom they brought in regularly loved to hide behind the curtain. He would stand there like an aged boy trying to play hide and seek, but the game had dragged on. The other kids had thrown in the towel, they had gone home, they had gotten old, and no one came looking for him. Yet he would stand there behind the curtain and peek out timidly to see what was taking them so long. And the most terrible thing about hide and seek is realizing that no one is looking for you anymore. I don't think he will ever come to that realization, thank God. Actually, our bodies turn out to be quite merciful by nature, a little amnesia rather than anesthesia at the end. Our memory, which is leaving us, somehow lets us play a little bit longer. One last time in those Elysian fields of childhood. It's like saying, please, just 5 more minutes, just let me play 5 more minutes, like in the old days, playing outside in the street, before we get called home for good. Just food for thought. Not easy. Okay, goodbye. Thank you.